Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. Let's take a look at a response to one of my videos.
And you have a history of engaging in bad faith with no remorse.
Alright, let's see it.
Let me open by showing you I don't suffer from such delusion. Besserman did not say what I sincerely thought he said.
I sincerely appreciate you acknowledging that. I did not think you would do that, so allow me to apologize for misjudging you there.
Now you want me to engage honestly with your claim, which means I have to point out for you that you never evidenced your claim.
I absolutely provided evidence. If you think I did not provide enough evidence to prove it, well, that's not really what I'm here to do. This isn't where the consensus is litigated. This is where I share the state of the field. If you disagree with the consensus, go to the academy and try to change the consensus. But pointing out that I have not comprehensively or exhaustively argued the case to your satisfaction just means you don't understand what my channel is about, even though I have already thoroughly explained it directly to you.
I want to be clear before I go further. I still maintain that Genesis reflects that God is the only thing in existence and then created things, everything that exists.
You can maintain it all you want. That has absolutely no bearing on this discussion because I am representing the consensus view of the experts. You are representing a minority view and have already had to acknowledge that the one argument you provided, which was just an appeal to the authority of one scholar, was misinformed.
The problem for you, Dan, is that even if you were right about the author's understanding of Genesis at the time of writing, you still haven't evidenced your claim.
Genesis 1 describes three things that were never said to have been created anywhere in the Bible. They were just there at...
So your claim is that Genesis 1:1 describes three things that were never said to have been created anywhere in the Bible: the earth, waters, and darkness. That was your claim.
Yes, and that claim is absolutely true. There is absolutely no part of the Bible that actually describes God's creation of the earth, of the chaotic waters of creation, or of the darkness that existed over the chaotic waters of creation, as described in verse 2.
So I take your position. Genesis 1 does not say when the waters were created, or the earth. But taking a univocal look at scripture, I believe it's best reflected that they were in fact created.
So you're asking me to accept a dogma that I have repeatedly, consistently, and emphatically refused to accept over the course of more than 3 years of content creation on social media. Now you put on the screen that even without a univocal approach, my conclusion is still less likely. I would like to see you make that argument.
There's a lot of scriptures we could go over, but let's focus on Proverbs 8. So I did further reading on this, and I came across an article by Matthew McAfee, a biblical scholar and professor. Maybe you've seen this paper, I don't know. But it's called The Creation of the World and the Role of Wisdom in Proverbs 8. His research focused on the intersection of wisdom literature in the Bible and ancient Near Eastern texts, specifically how Proverbs 8 relates to Genesis and other creation stories. So he and others affirm that Proverbs 8 was personified as a figure that was there before the world was created and was with God during creation. Wisdom is portrayed as necessary to God's creative process. Now, I'm not saying, and nor does the article suggest, that Proverbs 8 is a creation story. The document compares other ancient Near Eastern creation stories, showing similarities but also demonstrating how the biblical view is different. Proverbs presents wisdom as predating even the chaotic waters, which other creation stories have at the start of their creation.
So I have two concerns with this appeal to Proverbs 8. The first is, given that we need to be strict and we're going to be pedantic about what precisely my claim was, Proverbs 8 doesn't actually describe the creation of the earth or the depths or the darkness by God. Proverbs 8 makes a reference to when there were no depths and before the earth, and then makes other references to the drawing of a circle around the depths and the creation of mountains and streams and fountains, which is not describing the creation of the earth or the depths. It is just talking about things that happened to them after they already existed. So, since we're being strict and pedantic about what my claim was, I have to point out that Proverbs 8 does not actually undermine my claim. But what about that time before the earth and when there were no depths? Well, let's take a look at how you describe this. This is the personification of wisdom as a part of poetry. And it is highly rhetorical poetry as well. The whole chapter is representing wisdom as a female-presenting anthropomorphic sentient being that was procreated and then birthed by God, and attends kings, and is in the marketplace, and frolics alongside God as a master craftsperson in the habitable parts of the world. And it also means there was a time when wisdom didn't exist, before wisdom was procreated parthenogenetically, evidently, by God. So this is very rhetorical poetry, and you are obviously going to say, well, everything else doesn't matter doctrinally. Everything else is not an actual strict literal historical claim to philosophically informed fact. Everything else is just rhetoric. But we're going to draw a circle around this one thing here, and we're going to say where it talks about, oh yeah, I was there before the beginning, when it is talking hyperbolically about the primacy of wisdom, saying I was there when there were no depths, when there was no earth, that we're going to take as a strict literal proclamation of philosophically informed and sophisticated doctrine. So that's a pretty arbitrary choice to make there regarding the rhetoric of Proverbs 8.
Now, Dan, if I understand your position, and I could be wrong, but if I understand your position, you're taking more of a primordial material that God then began to shape and fashion into his liking. So if that's the case, I would really like to hear some academic literature, maybe from your own work, maybe written on it, or somewhere else, for where that material came from, if you don't believe that it is in fact stated in Scripture to have been created.
So that is a much more modern philosophical concern that did not occupy the transmitters of these ancient creation accounts. Certain stuff was just there from the beginning, and they didn't really interrogate it beyond that. And if you would like literature that establishes the consensus view regarding this, here are a bunch of texts from the last few decades that you can check out.
This could be a dogmatic view that you have that it was created, which wouldn't necessarily mean that it was wrong. But I'm gonna need you to play the part of the apologist and actually convince me as to why, if it's not stated anywhere in Scripture that it was created, that I should believe that it was created at all. Where are you getting this idea that it's not, for instance, eternal? What's keeping me from believing that?
I could not possibly care less whether or not you believe it was created at all.
I would be also curious as to what you make of Revelations. Who is God? Revelations 1:8 says, I am the Alpha, Chi, and Omega, the beginning and the end. First and last letters of the Greek alphabet symbolizing totality and completeness. God encompasses all existence.
That's not talking about all existence. You're reading these texts through philosophical interpretive lenses that were not created until around 170 to 180 CE.
Scripture clearly reflects that there is no one like God. Philosophically speaking, you cannot be an eternal thing if you have a beginning, meaning something pre-existed your being, your existence.
Well, there's your problem. You're not worried about what the authors and the earliest audiences of these texts understood by them. You're worried about how to interpret them in a way that harmonizes with a broader philosophical worldview. You're trying to understand these texts in a way that allows them to be true, instead of just trying to understand what the authors and the earliest audiences understood by them, which was almost never informed by philosophical inquiry.
If the Scripture does in fact reflect that,
it doesn't.
Then the Scripture does in fact state that the waters, the earth, were all created. Let me be clear, I don't believe that your position is implausible. I just believe mine is more likely. There are other scriptures I could have brought up, but for the sake of brevity, I want to get your response to just this one for now, because I believe this demonstrates that your claim was wrong.
No, I don't think you've done that. I think you've done two things here. One, you have just endorsed a bunch of minority positions without acknowledging, much less engaging, the consensus views and the arguments for them. And the other thing I think you've done is demonstrate that you are incapable of even entertaining the notion that the Scriptures can be engaged as anything other than inspired, inerrant, and univocal. And I think you demonstrated that most clearly in your ultimate retreating to the notion that the texts have to mean what you think they mean, otherwise they wouldn't be able to be subsumed within this broader, philosophically coherent and true worldview. You need the Scriptures to be true. You can't consider them anything other than true. And what that demonstrates is that you are operating under the hegemony of your dogmas, and not reason or evidence or anything like that. You are guided by your dogmatism. And last but not least, the fit for this video has been DuckTales, a woohoo!